Council Police and Fire Scrutiny Committee. Just before we start, Jim, Councillor MacLeod, are you okay? You still with us, Jim?
Yep, I'm still here.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Jim. And I think we have Steph Braun from the press. Steph, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay.
Yep, okay, thank you. Okay, we'll make a start anyway. So do we have any apologies or substitutions, please, Lindsay?
Yes, there's apologies from Councillor McElhaney with Councillor Robertson substituting, an apology from Councillor Jackson and Councillor Wilson.
Okay, thank
and
you
are
for
there
that.
any declarations of interest? No.
Okay, no declarations of interest. Okay, welcome along, Elizabeth. We'll start with item number 2 on the agenda, which is the Police Scotland performance report. David or Paul, whoever's speaking to this one.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I'll kind of open it up and then I'll hand over to Paul, who's the area commander, for the detail. So I suppose that the first point of this is it covers a period 1st April to 31st January 2021, so it does cover the fluctuating period of lockdown and easing, and it does show a general trend of a decrease in crime in most traditional areas across the board, lower than we would have expected had lockdown not been in place, but there have been kind of notable outliers, which also probably reflect that period of government restrictions and the changes in society, some of which include the use of cyber crimes, for instance. We've seen that kind of been an outlier, and trends and fluctuations. Elements of public protection, including domestic abuse. I'll be happy to take questions clearly following the input, but I'll probably just hand over to Paul for a bit of the detail and our response throughout that period, and a bit of a flavour of what we're doing within the local council area. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Paul, thank you.
Okay, so I'm pleased to report that Inverclyde has recorded a decrease in serious and minor violence. So I'll work my way through it. There is quite a bit to get through, so I'll go as quick as I can with this. So Group 1 crimes of violence have decreased by 14.2%. To 115 incidents. This represents 19 less victims. There were 3 fewer attempt murders, 12 fewer serious assaults, and 2 less robberies than this time last year. Our robbery detection rate has increased from 64% to 73.9%, and the overall detection rate for Group 1 crimes as a total is 67.8%. Now that's down from 74.6% in the previous year. So there is a bit of work ongoing to try and address that at the moment. I suppose with those figures, it is worth noting that of all Group 1 crimes, 44% of those occur indoors. So it makes it really difficult from an investigative perspective. But we will work on a detection rate for Group 1 overall to improve that. Antisocial behaviour. So in terms of antisocial behaviour, there's been 1,118 crimes that have been identified through directly through police proactivity, and this represents an increase of 5.9% on this time last year. Hopefully that figure will give everyone an assurance that we are being proactive to stop crime, and within these figures we've seized sizable amounts of drugs and offensive weapons, and mostly knives, I have to say. Assaults. So in terms of assaults, there's been 540 fewer assaults, which represents 8.2% reduction. So there's been 540 assaults, which represents an 8.2 reduction. I'd love it to be 540 less victims, but it's 48 victims less than this time last year. 154 of these assaults took place on emergency workers, most of which were against police officers. And I have to say that that's a staggering 42.1% increase on assaults on emergency workers. And I know that everybody at this meeting condemns that type of assault on our workers who are out there to protect people. Certainly not part of their job. We've highlighted that on social media. We've also highlighted whenever police officers or emergency workers have been assaulted via the local newspaper, which we've got a great relationship with, the Greenock Telegraph, and they've been publishing stuff for us on that. And that's to say that that type of behaviour is not going to be tolerated in Inverclyde. Fire raising. So there has been 45 fire raisings in Inverclyde over the reporting period. I'm glad to say that that's 10 fewer, still 45 too many, but it's 10 fewer than this time last year. Our detection rate is slightly dipped. It's at 22.9% compared to 25.5%. So there's some work to be done around about that. A lot of the fires are bins getting set on fire. We have got a strategy around about that, and we're working with the fire service with that as well. So hopefully we'll improve that situation. And just sticking on the fire raising, as everyone knows, Inverclyde sustained a period where there was firebomb incidents, and I'm really pleased to say that we've now made 13 arrests, 11 for attempt murder, 1 for multiple charges of conspiracy to murder, and 1 for a serious assault, which was part of that firebombing campaign. We still have a dedicated team on that inquiry, Operation Tell, and I can give an assurance that we will not stop that inquiry until we've exhausted all avenues and everyone is brought to face justice that have committed these unacceptable crimes in Inverclyde. Vandalisms. So vandalisms have decreased by 22.1%. This represents 115 less vandalisms. We're now sitting at a total of 405 that have been committed in the last year. Just moving on to acquisitive crime now. So shoplifting. Across Inverclyde, we've recorded 356 shoplifting offences. This represents a 13% decrease, or 53 fewer shoplifting incidents. And we've increased our detection rate of shoplifters from 79.2% to 84.8%. House break-ins. We've recorded 147 house break-ins across Inverclyde. Unfortunately, this is an increase of 10 compared to the last year. The majority of these house break-ins relate to sheds getting broken into, and we're doing a bit of work, community work about that to see what we can do there. Motor vehicle crimes. So motor vehicle crimes fell by 26.5%, and theft from motor vehicles continue to account for the highest percentages of the motor vehicle crimes. We've recorded a 4.2% increase in our detection rate for these crimes, moving from 37% to 41.2%. We've had a recent spate of motor vehicles getting broken into in Ward 7 in Inverclyde. A lot of these vehicles are getting broken into are insecure, so they've not been locked up overnight. So we're doing a wee education thing to the public around about that to remind them to lock their vehicles and keep valuables out of sight. So we're currently dealing with that at the moment, and there's an action plan to try and identify the persons responsible for doing these crimes. Bogus collars. There's been one bogus collar incident recorded in Inverclyde, and that involved an elderly victim paying for work that was never carried out. This type of behaviour is totally despicable. In an effort to try and eradicate that from Inverclyde, we linked up with Inverclyde Council and we put our Take 5 scam awareness leaflets into all the council tax bills, and that was to make members of the public aware of what a scam or a fraud or a bogus collar, what that looks like, and we're eternally grateful for being allowed to do that, because you've reached a really big audience in such an easy way there, so thank you for that. Moving on to public protection. So sexual crimes, so reported sexual crimes, we've seen a decrease of 40.4% to 78 crimes. This represents 53 fewer victims, and our detection rate has increased from 45.8 to 66.7%. I have to say that that's an excellent result, but we will try harder to improve that detection rate wherever we can. And it's also worth remembering, when we think about this type of crime, 73% of sexual crimes occur in houses, behind closed doors, and certainly for the last year, that's an increase from 57%, so more of that type of crime is happening indoors. And 39% of all reported sexual crimes were non-recent, and 16% were cyber-enabled sexual crimes. So rape, recorded rape and attempted rape. So we've seen 7 fewer victims. So we're now sitting at 21. This time last year we were sitting at 28. the detection rate for rape has increased from 39.3% to 95.2%. I have to say that's an excellent improvement. We would rather have 100%, but that is a significant improvement, and it's down to the absolute dedication of the PPU staff and indeed the victims coming forward. So that's a real good move in the right direction there. Missing persons. So there have been 43 missing persons. That represents a 59.8% reduction. And the number of young people going missing from children's homes has reduced from 31 to 6. And 77% of all missing persons have been traced within 24 hours. We are currently in the process of rolling out a new approach to how we deal with children missing from young persons' homes. The first 24 hours, if there's no risk, they will be recorded as not at home, and therefore the police won't get involved with that. That's a national thing that's been agreed. We are currently in contact with the children's homes here to get that rolled out. So certainly by the end of April, I'll have that rolled out, and I'll update the scrutiny panel at the next meeting how that looks. Domestic violence. So we've seen a 4.9% reduction in reported domestic violence incidents. So that's 793 incidents to 754. And of these, 445 resulted in domestic crimes being recorded. That's 8.2% less than last year's. I can give you an assurance that domestic incidents are closely monitored by the sergeants and inspectors every day. And every morning I go through personally every domestic incident to make sure we've taken the appropriate action. So I'm comfortable where we are with those figures at the moment. Complaints against the police. So in Inverclyde, we've recorded 43 complaints against the police. This equates to 24.3 complaints per 10,000 police incidents that we've attended. And I can give you an assurance that I personally review all complaints against the police, make sure a full investigation is taking place, and it's myself who makes the final decision on whether to uphold or not to uphold a complaint, whether it's a non-criminal complaint. If it's a criminal complaint, that goes to my colleagues in professional standards department to deal with that. Major crime and terrorism. So serious organised crime gangs. So targeting serious organised crime, it continues to be a priority for the division. We have got bespoke meetings that we have that look exclusively at the serious and organised crime situation in Inverclyde. I've already mentioned the firebomb incidents that fell under that category, and the great work, the fantastic work that's been done to bring so many people to account for that. The division that continues to manage, there's 2 serious and organised crime gangs in the division, one of which is predominant in Inverclyde. We will be relentless in our drive to bring that to a closure as quickly and as safely as we can. Okay, so I'm sorry, I know I'm rattling through this, but there is a lot to get through. So drug supply. So there's been 49 detections of drug supply in Inverclyde, and this is included for supply, cultivation and production of drugs. And whilst on paper it states that this is an 18.3% reduction, I will put a bit of caution round about that, because I do know that there is a number of items currently sitting at our labs waiting for analysis, and because of COVID it's taking a wee bit longer, and because of the type of substances it takes time to test these substances. I am absolutely confident when we get the results back for all these lab results, that 18.3% will not be there, and will probably be ahead of where we were this time last year. The typical drugs being seized in Inverclyde are diamorphine, benzodiazepines, etazolams, crack cocaine and cannabis. We will continue our approach to dealing with drug dealers in the area. I'm sure you're aware of a number of the drug warrants that have been executed recently, and we've had some really good results with that, seizing large quantities of drugs. We'll continue with that. There's a number of plans in place, which I won't talk about today, but I can give you an assurance that that is absolutely high on my agenda to continue in that vein. Cybercrime. So for the period April to December 2020, there was 139 crimes that have been designated cybercrime. and half of these were financial and economic crime, which is online fraud, and 19% were classed as threatening, offensive, or violent in behaviour. What I will say is, in relation to cybercrime, it's an ever-changing situation with cybercrime. But however, our cyber kiosk that we have got at Greenock Police Station has been an absolute huge assistance to operational officers when dealing with such inquiries. So that's a great tool for us, and I'm so pleased that we've got it at Greenock. Okay, so I'm nearly there. Road safety and road crime. So unfortunately, there's been 2 fatalities across Inverclyde in the reporting period, which is 1 more than it was this time last year. What I will say to that is there's been no further fatalities since the last Scrutiny Board meeting, which I'm pleased to report on that. Serious road injuries have decreased by 64%, which is 16 fewer victims. Slight injuries have decreased by 71%, and that's 66 less victims. And I'm also delighted to tell you that no children have been killed or seriously injured on any road in Inverclyde. And overall, traffic offences have fallen by 2.7%. Mostly that would be because of COVID and less traffic on the road. That's 960 offences that we've identified so far. We've seen an increase, however, in drink and drug driving offences of a staggering 52.4%. That's drink or drug driving offences. That's 31 more offences than it was this time last year. And I will comment on that, the support that I've received from my road policing colleagues has been outstanding, and a large part of this is down to them coming down and doing this for us. Disqualified driving, we've seen a significant increase of 37.5%. However, when you 37.5%, if I put that into context, that's 3 more disqualified drivers than it was this time last year. So it also looks a big percentage. The numbers is actually quite low. Driving offences have increased by 16.4%, which is 11 more offenders than it was this time last year. And insurance offences have, I suppose, significantly increased by 58.5%, and that's 76 more people being charged with driving a motor vehicle in Inverclyde without insurance. That's all the performance figures. On the other side of that report that you get, if I could just, I'll be 2 minutes with this, so I can just give you some idea of the local developments that are happening in Inverclyde Police. So the custody refurbishment of Greenock Police Station is now complete, and it looks lovely. And we're fully operational again, so we're open for business. That's good. We are also introducing the Custody Peer Navigator programme. That's received government funding for us to try it out in Greenock. I was a real supporter of this, and I was desperate to get it into Inverclyde before anybody else got it, so I'm delighted that we got it. So that basically will be, individuals will come into the police station and they will speak to individuals who've been arrested and signpost them away from crime. In terms of supporting partners, it's about breaking the cycle of offending. And if this is successful in Inverclyde, there is a plan to roll that out nationally. So I will make sure that's successful. Okay, and then we're about to introduce a thing called distress brief interventions. Again, I was very keen to get this into Inverclyde. It is in a number of police stations across Scotland. I've worked with this for a number of years. Opportunity came up for us to introduce it into Inverclyde. I grabbed it with both hands. Basically, the long short of this is Sam H will be the coordinator of this. The police, there'll be 2 stages to this. So police officers go to an individual who's got a mental health issue, and we can signpost them to Sam H, who will then Sam H will then contact them within 24 hours, and they will maintain that support for a further 14-day period. That's a fantastic service for us to have in Inverclyde. So I'm probably looking around about June time before we can actually get the police officers trained in it. We're currently training up doctors and various other people like that to make sure that they know all about this. But that'll be in the summertime, that's coming. remote video interview. So the transition from primary to secondary school, we're going to get involved with parents and pupil questions about policing and cybercrime and all kind of stuff like that. So it'll be a question and answer session. So we're going to run with that. And sticking on the theme of education, we've now got a dedicated SPOC community police officer identified for every high school in Inverclyde. That's been well received by the head teachers, and also have a school liaison officer who's now overseeing all of that. So as the schools are back to normal, we should definitely see an improved level of visibility, I suppose, of those officers in those schools. So that's been very well received, I have to say, by the schools. Last 3 bits for me. We're also going to get involved with the Do You Know campaign with Inverclyde Council, and that's about giving parents the opportunity to be alerted when their children comes to the attention of either the police or the community wardens in areas where there's antisocial behaviour, or individuals have been charged with antisocial behaviour, drinking in the street, drug offences, weapons, all that kind of stuff. And it's basically a parent alert letter that will go to that parent to say, do you know your child was in this area? So we're going to be an active participant in that. We are looking at introducing, and I'm really excited about this, so I'm going to try and contain myself, a partnership hub, and it's going to be an Inverclyde community partnership hub, which will allow all the key partners in Inverclyde to meet, whether it's 5 days a week, 2 days or 3 days a week, I'm not quite sure. There's a meeting on the 1st of April to discuss that. And what that will allow us to do is it will allow us to look at the previous 24-hour instance from a police, from a community perspective, housing, social work, community wardens, and look at those collectively and decide who's the best person to deal with that. And we'll do that, round the table. Well, I would imagine it'll be done in a similar fashion to this, but that will speed up decisions, and that will speed up how we can make things better for everybody in the division. That's me. Take it, nobody's got any questions.
Thanks very much, Paul. And I'm interested to hear the more details in the partnership hub, and I'm sure we'll hear that within the next few weeks, either via yourself or Ruth, or maybe a members briefing or whatever. David, do you wish to add anything else before I open up for questions?
No, I suppose, Tommy, just on the back of Paul's update, the report, we're going to have a bit of a look at the report as well, just in terms of taking some feedback from members. So we'll probably rejig that yourself and others. And I know there's a bit of work ongoing there, but hopefully it kind of meets your expectations just now. I think we can probably do a wee bit more around probably summarising it a bit without losing the detail, but also providing a bit of trend information. That the last year has been a bit unusual, because if you compare the last year with like previous years, it's a bit of an outlier. So I think we can probably do something around trend information going forward, but we'll update on that in due course.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay, I'm going to come to Councillor MacLeod on the phone first, Jim, and then it'll be Councillor Moran followed by Councillor Clockerty. Jim, any questions, Jim, please?
Yeah, thanks, convener. First of all, I'd just like to say thanks to the continuing work over the last year from both police and fire service for all we've done in very difficult times. Can I thank David and Paul for the report? It's well laid out, and there's a lot of information in there which has been it's just been gone through. Just 2 or 3, a couple of questions. Sorry, rather. I'd raised the matter before about the number of assaults there is on our emergency staff, and I think I see there has been a bit of a decrease in this, but still it is shocking, and I really think that what we really need to see is our courts getting to grips with this and meting out appropriate sentences regards that. I just wondered, when it came to you've got 44% of group crimes occur within private households. Now, I imagine that, you know, a lot more people are obviously staying at home because they've been asked to stay at home during the pandemic, so I wouldn't imagine many of those crimes would be like some burglaries. So what sort of crimes are we all talking about here? Is it domestic crimes, or is there any other crimes that I'm not thinking about here?
Paul?
So are you talking about Group 1 crimes in total for the 44%? Is that what you're talking about there? Sorry.
Yes, I mean, that's what I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is literally, well, it's assaults, serious assaults, arguments, domestics. It is a whole mix of that kind of flavour of incidents that we're getting. I would call it normal business, but nothing's normal really, is it, when you're being assaulted? But it is generally common assaults, or where I suppose individuals have taken weapons to each other as well. But the vast majority of people where that's happened is they've known the individual as well. So it's not like stranger assaults like that. It's mostly people who know each other.
Yeah, can I just ask, is that because maybe I'm not reading this right here, or whatever, or maybe it doesn't really explain that 44%. If it is, you know, a lot of it's violence and domestic crime or whatever within a household, has that been an increase over the last year then, since we've seen two lockdowns?
So I could probably come in here. So that group covers what is effectively grouped as serious and minor violence. So violent offences, including robbery. There's an element of violence. So I think we'd have to check in terms of the trend for private households versus previous year. I'd expect that's probably gone up as a proportion, as you've said, due to the fact the nighttime economies closed down. You get probably more people drinking at home, so I would expect to have seen that increased because we've seen less footfall outdoors. So probably the violence itself it has reduced slightly, but it's probably migrated to indoors more than it has out in the street. But again, we can check that and give you an update.
Okay, thank you for that. And can I just add that, you know, it's good to see that a lot of crimes across the board have fallen, certainly over the last year. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Move on to Councillor Moran.
Thank you. Can I echo Jim's thoughts here about the report? It's a good report, but in that report there's always a couple of things that I need a bit of clarity on, if that's okay. You can do that. The first one would be the complaints received about the police, and I could understand the operational matter behind this and how it's dealt with in-house to a certain extent. But I'm reporting at the Elise Angelini report, when she said that she thought that the police scrutiny could be a lot better for not just the police board's call, but also the local committees. And I don't know, we had a paper last time, convener. It was on your agenda. We never discussed it. It was just not even acknowledged. Now, I thought that was a piece of work that was done with Angelini, who was commissioned the Scottish Government to do that piece of work. And I thought at the very least we'd be doing some discussion on it. So I don't know how this reflects on the police getting complaints, dealing with ourselves, and outcomes that dealt with them ourselves. We never hear about it. Maybe we shouldn't. But at the end of the day, she's saying that the scrutiny is not good enough. So I want to know, will we be having a debate on that report, or are we just going to, no, we never even noted it. So can you tell me what's happening on that report and about how the police actually deal with these complaints that none of us knowing about?
Yeah. Certainly, Councillor Moran, I attended the Police and Fire National Scrutiny Conveners Board a couple of weeks ago. Now, unfortunately, the dates of that don't coincide with the pre-agenda for this meeting. However, we are, and I have discussed with Chief Inspector Cameron, they're going to revamp, I think, they're looking to revamp their whole report, and part of that will be to enhance the details behind what you're seeing there just now. and we have a copy at the moment of a different scrutiny report, which breaks down the police complaints, and it's not set in stone, and it's for members to decide or to make suggestions, where we'll have more detail on the complaints, whether it's on duty, off duty, the outcome of complaints. Well, there's a whole new realm of different stuff which we're going to bring forward, and that all relates back to the Angelini report, where it's been recommended that the boards have a greater view of police complaints, and they can hold the police to account and scrutinise them. That'll probably be coming, depending maybe to the next board, Robert, or maybe the one after that, but I don't imagine it'll be any later than that. But we are working on that, and that's certainly something that's going to come back. And if you've got any input, please let me know, or the police directly. But that is something we'll be actively taking up, and you'll see changes on the reporting style and the content of the reports regarding complaints, and then you're free to ask any question you like as you see fit on that. But that's something we're definitely looking at, and it's something that's going to change in the future.
Right, I'm quite happy with that response, Keena. As I say, I have kind of looked at the report, and she said that the local board should get a lot more scrutiny, a lot more information to carry out their duty. So I'm looking forward to that. The second question I'm going to ask, the distress briefing intervention. Now, I sit in the Alcohol and Drug Partnership, and I think this is a great thing. But I've been asked by one of my colleagues, has the police been given any extra resources to carry out these new duties? Will it affect their duties when they're on duty? Will this have an effect on how they perform their other tasks? Because this is quite a substantial piece of work, and the mental health issues has been through the roof as we're sitting here talking. Now, if the police are dealing with some individual who, for what reason, has got mental health issues, is it taken off their other duties, and then we're running with I'm told, quite a thin shift pattern at the moment. Is this going to have an effect on how the police carry out their other duties during their normal shift if they're dealing with mental health issues?
Okay, thanks, Robert. Paul?
Yeah, so I can answer that. So I'm very familiar with the DBI process. I've worked in divisions that I've got it up and running. So what I would say is at the moment, mental health calls do take up a significant amount of time for the police. Certainly the follow-up stuff that takes place thereafter as well does take up a lot of our time. So actually the DBI process is going to free us up of a lot of time. Because what it will do is we'll have an individual. Now, if we need to take an individual to hospital for assessment under the Mental Health Act, of course we'll do that, and there's various routes in which we can do that in Inverclyde. But if an individual we go to and we're reasonably satisfied, and there's maybe been a telephone conversation with a CPN, and we're happy that that individual does not need to go for any further assessment, and with their permission, we do. It's literally going to be an email that will go to Sam H, and they'll pick up on it on the following morning. They'll then make contact with the individual within 24 hours. But the beauty of it is for us is that for the next 14 days, they'll have that dialogue with that individual. So, so that is ultimately going to be better for the police. And a lot of times when we walk away from individuals, we do walk away and we are still worried about them. And we'll go back the next day. But that going back the next day, we may not necessarily, we might still do it with some people, but we may not necessarily need to do that with other people because we know Sam H are following up on it. And if Sam H don't get the individual, then they contact us anyway to say that they were unable to get in touch with them. So actually, in a lot of ways, the DBI is a fantastic tool for operational officers, and it actually gives us some real meaning to what happens next to that individual. So I think it will work out less work. I'll tell you when it's up and running if it's to the contrary, but I just don't see that happening.
Thanks, Paul. That's a great explanation. It certainly made it a lot clearer to myself, and I will certainly pass your comments on to my colleague who asked me to bring this up today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Now, can I have Councillor Clockerty followed by Councillor?
Thanks, Tommy. Paul, I'm going to be a wee bit parochial, is my way. I mean, since the last report, we've still got the anecdotal evidence about the centre of Greenock. We had my fellow ward councillor on about the Stewart Centre and the problems that one of the shops had at the Stewart Centre. We had the unfortunate death of the guy at the Well Park area at Bank Street. We're still getting reports of low-level drug dealing, and what you're scared of. It's a lot easier for an area to get a reputation. It's a lot harder for that area to lose that reputation. And I'm not naming the areas because I know you know them, and I know your beat cops know them, and I know they're up at the relevant houses. It's really just, it's not really a question for you. It's probably just a plea again about the centre of Greenock. And I know other areas might be the same, but we certainly still have that anecdotal evidence of low-level drug dealing, of that community safety angle of it, that people are that wee bit, I wouldn't say scared, but the area is getting that wee bit of a reputation, and it's just for your beat cops who are doing a tremendous job just to keep on and seeing what we could do to crack down even further, because the instances, I know you all know, not as soon as you actually close one shop, it seems as if another one opens. So I don't know what can be done, but it's probably just a plea to you regarding the centre of Greenock.
Yeah, and so I'm absolutely aware of all the issues that you're talking about there. I will give you an assurance that there is the patrols are definitely there. They're there right now, and they'll stay there. And where I can enhance that. One of the things that I'm trying out is I'm putting a lot more of the community officers out on bikes. I know this isn't the answer to everything here, right? But they'll cover a bigger area, and they'll be able to get about much quicker. So you will start to see a lot more officers out, certainly the community police officers out on cycles. So that you know, the visibility will be there better than what it is. They'll cover a bigger area. We do have a number of action plans for the city centre. We are getting drugs. I'm not going to say every day, but we are getting drugs from our Section 23 power searches. We are getting weapons. So it is part of my plan in terms of our deployment model here. The centre is definitely, there's always resources in the city centre, and the surrounding areas, obviously. And in terms of shutting up shop and stuff like this, I know exactly what you're saying there, and I can't go into too much details, but I can absolutely assure you that we are all over that. There will be some results coming. Please be patient, and we will get there.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I like the idea of calling Greenock city centre. That gives me a wee bit of...
Okay, thanks very much, Jim. And Jim, just on some of the points you make, I know Paul had briefly mentioned the partnership hub, and I've had conversations with him about it. And I think this is another tool which may help some of the issues, maybe not them all, but maybe get them dealt with maybe a bit quicker. And as I say, we'll be perhaps bringing back a briefing on that in the future, and one or two other issues. But we'll keep you updated on that, and we'll see how things progress on that. So, Councillor Robertson next, please.
Thanks, Convener. I'm going to sneak in a second question. I've got two, if that's all right. I was only going to have one, but then Jim said something that provoked another one, so apologies. The first one is really just about the town centre. Literally the week that we went into lockdown the first time, so like a year ago from literally now, there was an initiative, a partnership initiative that was being launched literally that week for the town centre, and we had a kind of members briefing about it. We were invited down to the police station to hear about how it was going to go, and it did sound really exciting, a little bit innovative, looking at things in a kind of thinking outside the box way in terms of dealing with some of the issues that we know exist in the town centre. And I'm just going to add my plea on to Jim's plea that maybe we can resurrect that. Specifically, I know that you've got other things maybe on the go, but it did seem like such a great thing to try and do. I know we probably can't do it right now because we're not back at that point in human history yet, but when we are, if we could resurrect that, that would be amazing. As my first question. My second question is actually about the rape statistics. And obviously you all know that I'm not normally here around this table, you guys all are, so I'm possibly asking a question that you all know the answer to. I'll kind of apologise for that, but kind of not. if we've got a rape detection rate of 95%, what's the relationship between rape detection and conviction? Because my understanding of rape conviction levels is that they're shockingly low, like 5%, 3%, that kind of level. And I'm not really sure in terms of what the relationship is between detection rates and eventual conviction rates. So it would be helpful for me to get a handle on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that one, Councillor, in reverse order for the second question first in terms of detection rate. So the detection rate under the Scottish Criminal Recording Standard has a definition that's basically a sufficiency of evidence to report somebody to the Crown Office for consideration of prosecution. Once that's reported to Crown Office, it's entirely in their hands as to whether that proceeds on the basis of public interest. Quite often, Crown Office will instruct additional investigation into matters where they feel that they need further evidence to fully explore that to the satisfaction of the court. But when we report the crime to the fiscal, that crime is marked as detected, and that goes down as our statistics. Now, clearly, the court and the judicial process is independent of the police, and that's constitutionally important to recognise. So I can't really comment in terms of that judicial process. That's a matter for Crown Office and thereafter the courts. We play our part within that, but the conversion rate between detection rate and conviction rate is, I suppose, subject to academic review as well, more widely as a societal interest. So I would just offer that by way of explanation. That makes your satisfaction.
Yeah.
In terms of point one, I'm absolutely sure that Paul is already looking to the future for town centre action plans for Greenock in terms of multi-agency plans. And as we come out of lockdown, as we see kind of footfall increase, that's absolutely on our radar right across the division. And one of the areas I'm interested in is exploring links with ADPs, people with addictions, so that we're not just focusing on one element of a problem, so we're treating people with respect and dignity and trying to move them out of the criminal justice system where applicable towards recovery. So we're not just moving them about and treating them as offenders where they've actually got addiction problems. I also fully recognise Councillor Cloarty's points about the reputational aspects on businesses, so it's trying to take that holistic approach, and your suggestion of a partnership initiative is certainly one that we'll look at. If we can involve councillors and briefings around that, then absolutely we'll do that.
Okay, thanks. Elizabeth, are you okay with that? Or you want to come back? Okay, fine. Do we have any other questions before we move on to the next agenda item? Oh, okay. Thanks very much. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is the local fire and rescue plan for Inverclyde. David.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, this meeting's fallen out with our normal reporting, our quarterly report, so it's probably a good time for us to bring in this draft plan for the forthcoming 12 months. And whilst these usually sit over 36 months, there's a high likelihood that the fire and rescue framework will be reviewed next year, which will mean a new strategic plan and a new suite of local fire plans. So at that stage, there'll be a full consultation process done. So we've got this plan which follows the similar pattern. Just before I start, to give you some confidence about activity levels, certainly since the start of 2021, they are down, and in some cases the lowest for 5 years. Probably 2 areas where we've seen a slight increase over the last couple of months, as Paul alluded to during his paper, is deliberate fire setting. And also unwanted fire alarm signals. So these are 2 areas of attention for us to look at. We had an area management team meeting today, and these were discussed, and the local senior officer, Mr McNeil, has challenged us to do a forward look rather than looking in the rear view mirror, as he calls it. He wants us to try and get ahead of that. So confidence levels in terms of our retained duty system colleagues at Greenock, Port Glasgow and Gourock is the highest in Scotland. It's sitting at 97%, and our absence rate within Inverclyde is the lowest across our 3 local authority areas, and it's sitting at 2.39%. So we monitor every day any COVID cases that we've had, any self-isolations, but we've been in a reasonably, to use the phrase, healthy position for some period of time now. In terms of the plan itself, committee members will see that it follows the same pattern and the same headings. We've tried to take cognizance of COVID. It has, of course, given us challenges over the course of the last 12 months and how we go about our normal business, not least of which how we engage with young people, how we engage with householders, and how we carry out our fire safety enforcement function. And we've seen that across the board. The Deputy Assistant Chief, who is head of function for prevention and protection, had said that, you know, we're not been able to deploy as quickly as we can in the non-domestic environment, but we've still tried to move that onto a virtual platform. So we're keen, like everybody is, to get back to some sort of normality so that we can deploy again in the manner in which we're used to. One area within the plan I would probably draw the committee's attention to is unintentional injury and harm. We've had lengthy discussions as a management team about how we assist partners getting into people's houses at an earlier stage of their life and before individuals potentially take that spiral into looking towards a poor health outcome. So we've committed a bit of spending to Care and Repair, who sit across 3 local authority areas, and the way it manifests itself in Inverclyde is through the Centre for Independent Living. So we've given them funds, and we've sat down with Scott Curry, who's their project lead, to see how we can assist them identifying those most vulnerable in our communities and going in and demonstrating how a small spend on things like, you know, fixing carpets or fitting non-slip material outside their house, you know, anything at all that's in that house that person can get a bit of support. If we can make an intervention and put a small spend in at that stage and then evidence that's potentially impacting on a larger spend with our colleagues in the NHS, then that's a good place for us to be. We didn't want to come in the stage of the journey that we've always come in at, which was when there'd been a fire. We're trying to backpedal a bit in history to make sure that we can try, along with partners, to go in at a stage and make somebody a wee bit more safer and securer in the house. And that's also been inserted within the strategic assessment, and I know Ian's on the call, as a wider home safety priority. We want to try and do as much as we can as a fire service to make sure that we can go in informed about the other third sector organisations and the other partners within the local authority that can make an assistance in that person's house. It might not necessarily be us doing the work, it's certainly making our staff aware of the risks in the home that can be addressed. UFAS as well, some of our top reporters tend to be our schools, and that's something that we know. Our schools and our hospitals and our care facilities, we've not been able to deploy into our schools as much as possible, but we have a date in the diary to sit down and see if we can come up with something more innovative that supports our young people staying in the classroom and limits the amount of fire actuation. So that's a piece of work that I'm keen to progress, and we can have a discussion about that and there's some colleagues on the call that will be sitting around that table. And if we can get it right, and if we can do it in a safe manner, I think it will be a really valuable piece of work, and it was something that Inverclyde can hold up as best practice, hopefully, and that can then let me move that into other local authority areas and hopefully influence the service to do something around UFAS. If we're going to free firefighters up to do more meaningful work in the communities and their core role in their training, it's important that we look at the areas where we're having most of our resources put to, and if we can make an effect on that, then we can free our firefighters up to do that. Accidental dwelling fires over the course of the last 12 months is something, not just looking at the increase because people were in their houses, but cooking always seems to come up. So I've set a challenge to the community action team to see how we can best address that, whether that's through education or whether it's actually drilling down to see why it is, because cooking always features highly on there, and I know committee members will be looking at, and quite rightly we come back to me and say, what are you doing about that? And I've asked myself that question, so I've set my community action team a task that as and when we can deploy more effectively out into people's homes and get front and centre and talk to them, how we actually address that figure, because cooking seems to come up quite a lot. So that's really the structure of the report. It's taking cognizance of COVID and the restrictions that have been on us, but how we're going to look forward in the future. Just to support what colleagues in Police Scotland said, the distress brief intervention training includes fire and rescue personnel as well. I had a meeting about that this morning at 9:30. Jason Logston from Police Scotland was on, but quite rightly so. Primary care, health and social care will be prioritised, doctor surgeries, and then we will come in on that journey further down the line, and we're more than happy to do that. I think it's something that's really important. We've looked inwardly at our own staff in terms of mental health and support. one of our watch commanders at Paisley started up the fire service's first mental health group called Talk Group 20. We have 19 talk groups on our radios, and he called this Talk Group 20, and that's been running now for just over 12 months. Very successful and long overdue in our job. It's not something I would ever see in my service, so it's been really important thing for us to champion, and now that we've got that embedded with our own staff, I think it's right and proper that we look externally as well and see how we can affect that. So the DBI piece of work through SAMH and the local authority has been quite timely for us, because I think we're in that spot. The last couple of things, and Paul had touched on it as well about Operation Tell, you know, being no doubt, we discussed this at a management team meeting this morning. That was a real collective effort across a number of partners in the local authority, and because we have good relationships with our colleagues, we were able to deploy really quickly onto that, and we used our support staff, our RDS colleagues, community action team, flexi duty officers right across the board, and that fed back into a national basis to the police and crime campus. It fed back into our colleagues to do all the instant response plans and all the pieces of work around each individual address, and it was a real success story. And to come out of what was quite a challenging time, you know, it's good to reflect back to see that those relationships were there. So it was really good. The last thing I was going to touch on, and I'd mentioned this previously, I think to Ruth, was about recruitment, and the fire service have got themselves to a position now where it's looking more likely that it'll be a rolling recruitment process. When the recruitment portal opened up just at the tail end of last year, they were focused mainly on the north service delivery area and the east. That focus is now shifting to the west. So I spoke to one of my colleagues in headquarters the other day, and I'm quite keen to run, I think that it's obviously in an online format just now, some positive action days. I think it's important that we reach out to the communities and show them that a career in the fire service is something that might suit them. You know, it might be something they enjoy, but I think we need to focus on the underrepresented groups in the community, and run an event, hopefully in conjunction with the local authority, to see how we can encourage more ethnic minority, more females to join the job. You know, we have seen a position in the fire service where I could have told you every female firefighter in the organisation. That is not the case now, and that's a good thing. The demographic within our job is changing, but we still have work to do. So now that focus, I didn't want to run it too soon, bringing people forward, and then there was nothing but there was no West service delivery positions, but we're at that spot now. So it's maybe something I'll take off table, and I'll speak to a couple of colleagues in the call and see if we can get something out and get that out to the residents within Inverclyde. That's me, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Questions? Councillor Moran, please.
Aye, well, once again, David, it's a very good report. But I've got a wee, maybe a question I'd like to ask you. It's achieving the reduction of fire within non-domestic premises. In my ward here, the police have discovered two major cannabis farms. One of them was in a town centre location. But far I know, these use a lot of electricity, and they're quite a danger, you know, if they're not attended to. Now, my question to you would be, do you work with the partners, police and the council indeed, and do you have a list of all these empty factories and properties within Inverclyde, and do you ever contact the owners or do an audit on any of these premises? Because the one in Port Glasgow, God forbid, the fact it went on fire, it had been a real built-up area. The ones up at the factories, not so much, but certainly the one at the old Plaza Mingle Hall, the fact it went on fire, God knows what will happen. So my question would be, do you work with the council, the police? Do you have a list of empty properties, and do you know who owns them, and do you ever audit them?
David.
Thanks for that, Councillor Moran. Quite coincidentally, my pager went this afternoon for a cannabis cultivation down in Muirkirk of all places. They had a house down there, and the challenges that we get, you're right, you have to get, you know, the electricity board's asset protection team out and look, because a lot of the times the meter has been bypassed. In short answer to your question, no. In terms of audits, empty buildings wouldn't be audited as a matter of course. The way in which our audit programme works is that there are framework premises, and it's based on, if I can be simplistic, care homes, hospitals, new HMOs and hotels that have previously scored high risk. So that workload is encapsulated in that. However, what a commitment I can give you is that wrapped up in the enforcement framework is also the ability for us to do thematic audits. You know, that could be if we have seen a pattern of fires within non-domestic, particular types of non-domestic premises, for example, takeaways with accommodation above, then we can do a thematic audit of those premises and sample a few of them in the area. So I'm happy to take that to my partners and see if I can get a list. I can speak to the council officers, because if that's something that you think there's value in doing a thematic audit on these types of premises, then I'm more than happy to carry that piece of work out.
I fully understand it. You've got so many things to do. You're juggling so many balls. I thought, you know, even with the council, surely we have a list of these empty properties and who owns them, and we could get in there to stop a fire before it happens. Because you always say prevention is better than cure, David.
And this is the thing, you're absolutely right, Councillor. Unfortunately, these empty premises are the ones that get targeted by people that are wanting to deliberately set a fire. I suppose the only reflection I can have in terms of our enforcement framework is that, you know, the risk within these buildings in terms of the risk to life increases, and that's where we focus our attention at the start in terms of our framework premises. But I'll reiterate, if there's a facility for me to do a thematic audit on these types of premises and carry out a piece of work, I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you very much for your response.
Okay, thanks, David. Thanks, Robert. Do we have any other questions for the SFRS?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry, Jim. Sorry, I do apologise. On you go.
That's okay. Yeah, thanks for the report. And again, it's good to see a lot of good and welcome information here. It's good to see that obviously fires are down. But it's, you know, we've seen for some time now the other work now that the fire service are doing about interventions, and I've always been a great believer that prevention is better than cure, and it's welcome to hear some of the stuff that you're doing along with the Health Social Care Partnership around care and repair and looking at preventions of injury and you know, things that cause fires within people's homes. So that's really good news. Also good to hear that you've got systems in place to help your staff. It's a question that I've asked the council, and I know the council have got things in place to help staff with their anxiety and stress over the past year, because that's taken its toll on so many people, so it has. My question, a wee bit on the back of what Robert had said about empty premises. I know he referred to the plaza. One of the, you know, 2 or 3 of the empty premises are up in the industrial estate in Port Glasgow, and that's certainly been an issue in the past. You know, and I know that 1 or 2 of these buildings, you know, have had fires set in them before. So I think going forward, I agree with Robert. I think something should maybe be done in liaison with the police and the local authority to keep a tighter control on these empty premises, and obviously, you know, there's an onus on the owners of these properties, whether you know, empty or not, to keep them secure and to keep them as safe as they possibly can be. And some of them aren't, to be honest. But yeah, it'd be good if that was done. The other question I do have is on it's on page 18, and it talks about major events and you know, the emergency services and other organisations, what they would do to deal with major events. Can you maybe, I mean, I can imagine, you know, some of the events, what constitutes a major event. If you could maybe give us some instances of what you would see as major events, please. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just take them in order then. So essentially, with regards to empty premises, you know, we talked about COVID for the last 12 months, and Councillor Moran's quite right to point out that there's empty premises there, and the more you play that out in your head, you think there's potentially going to be an increase in these, because sadly there's been a significant challenge for business over that period of time, so it may indeed find that we see more of these premises. And I suppose if we can get to a position of true community intelligence where, regardless of the partner, if they were, for example, to see graffiti, or litter, etc., or evidence of people being around about that building of insecure, even if it wasn't their own sphere of influence, to be able to report that back in to the centre, and for the appropriate agency to deploy and make sure if it was insecure, for example, that's obviously leading up to potentially a fire or people being within the premises. So yeah, I think that's maybe a piece of work that I'll take away and speak to the LSO about. In terms of the major events, it can be anything from a major event that we are in attendance at, or a major event that's being in the planning. The way in which we support these events, we have a group of people allocated to each area. Some of you may come across Bill Robb, who's our civil contingencies officer. So that whole emergency planning piece goes in the lead up to any major events or any major incidents that we attend. So it's all about contingency planning, make sure we've got the right resources in the right place at the right time. And we're also considering every eventuality. The global pandemic itself is something that has, pandemic flu has been something that's been talked about in the emergency planning world for quite a while with our business continuity plans. So we were able to deploy quite quickly as an organisation with regards to PPE and getting our places COVID secure, because a lot of the things that had been in the planning for it had already taken place. So it's really about us being on the front foot, making sure that when event organisers come around, the tall ships, for example, when they come to Inverclyde, we make sure that we sit down, roundtable discussions, desktop planning, and exercising to make sure that we've considered the possibilities and plan as best we can for these eventualities, and that comes back to our resources and where they are and the competence of our staff as well.
Okay, thanks, David.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim, thanks very much. I think that's us, so we'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is our normal update report. Ian, I think.
Good afternoon, members. The purpose of this report, as always, is to update the committee on current and emerging issues relating to police and fire and rescue services. I'd like to start by advising that since the submission of this report to the committee, there's been a couple recent and relevant updates, which I'll explain later, but propose to formally submit to the next meeting afterwards. Owing to the previously held committee meeting in February, there's only a handful of points within this report. Section 4 of the report in relation to the Scottish Police Authority notes just a couple of points. One in relation to the board meeting held on the 24th of February, with no updates relevant to this committee. Beyond that, the meeting on the 22nd of January focused on 2 reports: how Scottish Police Authority will respond to the independent review of complaints handling, investigations and misconduct issues in relation to policing acts, following on from Councillor Moran's earlier question, as well as I submitted a report on local policing programme. Moving on to section 5 of your report, Her Majesty's Inspectorate Constabulary, there is an update in relation to an assurance review of policing of the 26th Conference of the Parties, or COP26. This was previously brought to committee back in 2019 by the previous divisional commander. Obviously, COP26 was delayed last year. The point of note in this particular one is regarding the mobilisation of resources of Police Scotland and the impact that may have on local policing across Scotland. Section 6, which is regarding Police Scotland, it's relating to a survey on body-worn video. Members should note that the consultation request allowed members of the public to engage and offer their opinions on the deployment of body-worn videos in Scottish policing for the future. In order to ensure that a wide representation of the Inverclyde community had the chance to participate in the survey, the Inverclyde Community Safety Partnership led on the distribution of the survey across the full partnership, across a range of digital and print platforms. And I'm thankful to the Council's own corporate management, corporate communications team for releasing that on our media platforms. Owing to the delay of that consultation, and in conjunction with the corporate director and our council officers and the committee convener, there was no formal response from the local police and fire scrutiny committee to this consultation. Finally, in relation to item number 7, in respect of the Scottish Parliament Justice Subcommittee on Policing, the matter, as you recall, was discussed at our previous meeting, which included our submission to that. Just to let you know that at the Justice Subcommittee in January, the Deputy Chief Executive of the Scottish Police Authority spoke explicitly regarding our submission, and I recorded that at section 7.2 for your information. And what I would note is that subsequently since then, the final report has been published. It was published last week. There are possibly some points relevant for scrutiny committees across Scotland, and that will be tabled at the next meeting. In addition to that as well, we advised earlier today that the convener has been invited to attend the meeting with Police Scotland through the COSLA Police Scrutiny Conveners Forum, and there may be opportunities for members to provide comment in advance of that event, which is around about the use of remote piloted aircraft systems and body-worn cameras. This concludes the report, and members are asked to note the current and emerging issues relating to police and fire and related matters.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Can I just ask a question on 5.1 for Police Scotland? The COPS 26, that's going to take up a lot of resources before and obviously during the 13 days of the conference. Are we comfortable we have adequate resources to cover Inverclyde in a business as usual capacity? If you give us some assurances of that, please.
Yeah, I can basically give you that assurance that there are contingency plans in place to ensure that we'll have sufficient for business as usual policing in the Inverclyde area, and we'll also have access should there be any unusual events that we'd require support for from specialist units that will be deployed during the course of COP26. So there's a kind of overarching management structure nationally for it, and we will be seconding officers who have specialist skills such as public order trained officers and commanders, but we will ensure that we have a business as usual support plan in place for the local subdivisions.
Okay, thanks. David, do we have any other questions on this report, members? No? Okay, so we'll agree to note the report as in the recommendation. Okay, thanks very much for your attendance and your contribution today. Thank you.
Thank you.